This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a quick run through the markets. Starting in South Africa, MTN shares over there at the JSE had a fairly strong run today, closing about 3% higher, accounting for most of the gains that we saw in the top 40. Those gains, however, were offset by falls of 3.5% and 3.2% in Naspers and Process index heavyweights, and those essentially dragged the top 40 a lot lower. Between January 2020 to date, the NSE 20 in East Africa shed over 750 points, a near 30% fall. East Africa's largest bourse has spent most of 2021 under the 2,000 point mark. And EFG Hermes pointed out today that the polls in August may actually temper investors' appetite for Kenyan assets. We're still seeing fairly thin trading in the first week of the year. Safaricom had 6.75 million shares traded. It closed 1.3% higher today. Here's what's coming up tonight. The World Bank warns that Nigeria is forecast to have some of the highest levels of inflation worldwide in 2022. The South African probe details sickening corruption and fraud at the state carrier South African Airways. And after delisting from American markets, China Mobile lists in Shanghai. Our starting point at the show is Africa's most populous nation. Now, Nigeria is forecast to have one of the highest rates of inflation anywhere in the world in 2022. That is according to the World Bank. It points out that the country's multiple exchange rates, its capital controls, and the closure of land borders starting in August 2019 have all contributed to this surge in inflation, which stood at 15.4% in November. As CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam now explains, Nigeria had been grappling with slow growth well before the pandemic hit Africa's largest oil producer. And that created larger financing gaps, bigger dollar shortages, and of course, stoked inflation.
Nigeria has been posting double-digit inflation rates since 2015. The latest official report shows the Consumer Price Index dropped to 15.4% in November. The eighth consecutive time annual inflation has slowed since April 2021. Despite this, the World Bank has projected that Nigeria may have one of the highest inflation rates globally in 2022, and some experts agree.
The World Bank projection regarding Nigeria having one of the highest inflation rates for 2022, it's very close to reality. This is because when you look at what we have done in the last, say, 48 months, consistently, we have had double-digit inflation. Inflation is still increasing, but it is increasing at a reducing rate. At best, you say inflation slowed. It will not be correct to say inflation reduced, technically speaking, because 15.4% anywhere in the world is high.
The World Bank is concerned that the high inflation may hamper the nation's attempt at achieving economic recovery, and that could push about 8 million more citizens into poverty as purchasing powers continue to weaken.
We are in a negative territory, so that discourages investment, foreign investment, it discourages domestic investment, it discourages portfolio investment, it discourages all levels of investment. We know that. So that's why we are not comfortable with a very high level of inflation.
Food inflation has been the major driver of inflation in Nigeria. Experts say insecurity, weak infrastructure, and devaluation are among factors responsible for it.
We are still hostage to the insecurity, the pervasive insecurity in all the 6 geopolitical zones. We are still hostage to the forex, the turbulence in the black forex parallel market. So, which is really affecting the economy. We have to go for monetary policy mix that enables this country to support diversification of our economy, backward integration of our economy, and also promote growth and employment.
The first thing we think government should do is to use monetary approach for money supply to be controlled. But you see, the real causes of inflation is not limited to money supply. We also have fiscal implication. You know, the way government spend money, it does not have. So government needs to generate more revenue from this economy that is available. Another thing we need to do is to have a new thought about insecurity in Nigeria. If employing mercenaries will help us to reduce insecurity so that food inflation can go down significantly, I think is the way to go.
Economic watchers recommend that government strengthens its infrastructure, an action that could help reduce post-harvest losses, foster ease of doing business, and encourage local production. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
On to East Africa now. China's Foreign Affairs Minister Wang Yi has arrived in the Kenyan coastal city of Mombasa after wrapping up his visit to Eritrea. Now, while he was in Eritrea, he met with President Isaias Afwerki and the Foreign Minister Osman Saleh. In a joint statement after that meeting, both sides confirmed the establishment of a strategic partnership. President Afwerki said Eritrea and China formed a blueprint for cooperation in a whole host of areas, including mineral resources, agriculture and HR. He also called China an indispensable partner in Africa's development. On his part, the foreign minister stressed China's willingness to support Eritrea without interfering in its internal affairs. Wang Yi is set to visit Comoros next. All right then, so while he's in Kenya, what exactly is on the foreign minister's agenda? Let's find out. Nick Mudimba is in the port city of Mombasa. He joins us now live on the program. So Nick, the president and China's foreign minister are due to inspect ongoing work at the Kipevu oil terminal tomorrow. What else is on their agenda for the day?
Thank you, Ram. Absolutely. That will be one of the agendas tomorrow, inspecting the Kipevu oil terminals with His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta. And of course, there's so much that will be in store tomorrow. He'll also be having a round-table ministerial meeting with delegates from the ministerial side of Kenya, and of course, led by Ambassador, that is Foreign Minister Rachel Omao. So there'll be so much to be handled tomorrow. And of course, when you talk about Kipevu oil terminals, this will actually be a game changer in oil transportation and capacity storage for Kenya. So far, there'll be so much in store in terms of just logistical, and of course, talking about climate change, talking about security in the country, and of course, strengthening the already existing bilateral ties between China and Kenya. So it's part of the agenda. Also, Rama, something else is Wang Yi's arrival in Kenya has indeed open doors for many Kenyans, because now, as you know very well, infrastructural support and of course security support, when we talk about COVID-19 support, all those things will actually be handled in tomorrow's meeting. So it will be a very busy meeting, but again, the highlight of the day is where Foreign Minister Wang Yi will accompany the president to the Kipevu oil terminus, Rama.
So what more can you tell us about this near $400 million terminal that essentially is being financed by the Kenya Ports Authority? How does it change Kenya's ability to handle energy imports?
Absolutely right. Financed by Kenya Ports Authority, but again, catapulted by China in so many ways, construction and all that. So when you talk about turnaround time at the Kipevu oil terminus, this has actually will change the whole picture. When you talk about capacity, where Kenya is able to handle oil by itself, and of course, improving the economic perspective and doing business with other countries across Africa and of course around the world. This will actually boost Kenya's ability. Now, the turnaround time also will actually be improved. Many vessels will now be able to dock at the port, which is something that will boost timing, and also that this will be a very flexible terminus compared to the previous one, which was a bit slow. So all in all, this will improve the capacity of Kenya's ability to handle its oil products and oil, and of course, without a doubt, this will also benefit so many Kenyans who are actually working at the port, Rama.
Indeed, of course, the current terminal can only handle one vessel at a time. So this at least should essentially deal with that demurrage fees problem that's being passed through to the Kenyan consumer. Nick Mudimba there in Mombasa. We'll leave it there. Thank you. Now, several infrastructure projects are being constructed by Chinese firms in Kenya and expected to be completed by the middle of this year. Key among them, the Nairobi Expressway and a bus rapid transit system. Here's CGTN's Enoch Sikolia looking at how Chinese-aided projects are changing the East African nation.
A group of workers building the last pieces of concrete beams to be used in the construction of the expressway in Nairobi. Engineers are reinforcing beams using a technique that up till now has been largely theoretical in Kenya.
That is concrete that is, I would say, over-reinforced. So you're not just putting bars of reinforcement, you actually stretch the bars. So when you let go of them, they actually compel the concrete to come even closer together. So the concrete becomes stronger than it is.
The Kenyan Principal Secretary for Public Works says the construction of the expressway has helped Kenyan students experience the technology that has enabled engineers to build longer and bigger bridges.
We are using them as teaching laboratories. So we teach in the universities. But there's hardly any person in Kenya producing pre-stressed concrete.
The construction of the Nairobi Expressway is in the final stages. The road is expected to be ready for public use come May this year. It will be one of the most important pieces of transportation infrastructure in the Kenyan capital as it seeks to reduce traffic congestion. It's being constructed by a Chinese firm, China Road and Bridge Corporation, under a public-private partnership.
So if you get private money, 65 billion, which will be put here as foreign direct investment, there's nothing better than that. And so we wanted to show that PPP can work in Kenya and in Africa.
Indeed, Chinese companies are undertaking several infrastructure developments in the capital city and across Kenya. Stekol Corporation is building the country's first bus rapid transit system. Like the expressway, the BRT project is aimed at decongesting Nairobi.
A lot of people have told us that our relationship with China is not beneficial. For those who say that, I request them, come. Let them see a project like this. Let them see the project that we have done in Lamu.
China Communications Construction Company is building Kenya's newest port of Lamu. 3 berths have already been operationalized. The port is part of infrastructure project that Kenya is putting up in a bid to become East and Central Africa's major trade hub.
Our partnership with China is one that is mutually beneficial, that is based on win-win, and we are very grateful to the Chinese government, to the Chinese people, for the support that they continue to render, not only to our country, but to the rest of Africa.
With China's Foreign Affairs Minister visiting Nairobi, Kenya is seeking ways of deepening this relationship. Enoch Sikoli, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
On to Tunisia now. Authorities of there have ruled out any more interest rate cuts. That decision comes amidst a pandemic-induced crisis which has been exacerbated by the ongoing political uncertainty in the North African economy. Tunisia's central bank left the benchmark rate essentially unchanged at 6.25% in its final rate-setting meeting of 2021. It opted against making any changes despite rising inflation and the forecast of slow economic growth for 2022. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Anna Chouachi.
Tunisia has said reducing interest rates would not help economic recovery and warned it would instead entail an inflationary spiral. The Minister of Economy and Planning declared that rate cuts would also hurt middle-class families and retirees as the currency will depreciate.
I rule out some hypotheses and classical measures to revive the economy. We cannot cut interest rates because this scenario would entail an inflationary spiral and hit people's purchasing power.
The 2022 state budget set the investment and development-related expenses at $2.9 billion. The minister noted that the North African state's government will not authorize massive public investment as the debt ratio stands at 85%.
Unfortunately, we're aware that this is below expectations because economic actors are looking for measures to boost public investment and development. We must preserve the value of the dinar, which should not depreciate further, especially since we must preserve the major financial balances. We are thinking of solutions to the major stalled public projects.
Many economists believe that there is no way out of the current economic and social crisis without a boost in public and private investment in the country.
The government did not think of the budget of development and investment when drafting the 2022 state budget. The $2.9 billion will never be used for public projects, regional development or infrastructure. It will rather be directed to other state expenses. There will be no economic recovery after the pandemic without public and private investment.
Tunisia's Prime Minister Najla Bouden declared that her government aims to preserve the current industrial fabric, which was affected by the COVID-19 crisis and which has further been complicated by its political situation. The Minister of Economy and Planning announced the launch of a digital platform dedicated to Tunisian and foreign investors in the coming weeks. Authorities say the objective is to achieve economic growth that will increase resources, improve purchasing power, and activate the economic circuit. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
All right, and a quick run through some company news. Let's start with the EGX. The trading values of listed and unlisted stocks at the Egyptian bourse hit over $63 billion in 2021. Trading on bonds rose to an all-time high of around $34 billion in 2021. IPOs in the meantime hit over $764 million, up from $165 the year before. The EGX 30 went up by 10.2% in 2021, jumping to 11,949 points by the end of last Thursday's session. Airtel Africa has announced the first close in the sale of its telecommunication tower assets in Tanzania. That's to a joint venture company owned by a wholly owned subsidiary of SBA Communications as a majority owner and UK-based Paradigm Infrastructure. Now, the gross consideration for the transaction is about $176 million. Approximately $159 million of the proceeds for the transaction has been paid already. The Kenyan property developer Acorn is set to invest over $30 million to build 3 hostels in Kenya with a capacity to accommodate over 4,000 students. Now, the planned projects will be run by Acorn's DVET unit, which specializes in developing hostel brands Kwetu, QWETU, which is the premium offering, and Kijani for the mass market. Now, the project is expected to be wrapped up sometime in the first quarter of 2024. And finally, analysts expect that Samsung Electronics will post a record fourth quarter earnings thanks to solid demand for its server memory chips and higher margins in contract manufacturing. Now, they forecast that the smartphone maker could have hit around $12.7 billion in net earnings for the quarter ending in December. That would be up nearly 70% year on year, and a record fourth quarter for the South Korean electronics firm. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. The Zondo Commission details sickening corruption and fraud at the state carrier South African Airways. And we'll explore why Tanzania's central bank is saying citizens shouldn't worry about the country's debt burden. Details coming up shortly.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference. Welcome back to the program. Now, South Africa's Commission of Inquiry into long-running corruption when Mr. Jacob Zuma was in office has handed over the first part of its final report to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Over 4 years, the Commission heard from over 300 witnesses and it gathered over 1.7 million pages of documentary evidence submitted to it as these witnesses detailed their accounts of corruption, influence peddling and intimidation. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has the details.
Almost 4 years to the day since the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture started, Chairperson Judge Ramah Zondo handed the first of 3 reports to President Cyril Ramaphosa. The first part of the report is divided into 3 volumes. The first volume deals with corruption at the country's national airline, the South African Airways. It also targets the findings on the Gupta family who owned the New Age newspaper. The New Age newspaper was allegedly used to secure advertising and sponsorship from the state-owned government communication and information system. The Guptas are a wealthy family with origins from India. The family have been accused of meddling in state matters during former President Jacob Zuma's presidency. The third volume deals with the capture of the South African Revenue Services. Zuma set up the commission himself in 2018 after an order from the High Court in Pretoria. Both Zuma and Ramaphosa testified at the commission.
This is what I would call a defining moment in our country's effort to definitely end the era of state capture and to restore the integrity, credibility, and the capability of our institutions, but more importantly, our government.
The Commission of Inquiry heard testimony from hundreds of witnesses who spoke out about corruption during former President Zuma's 2 terms between 2009 and 2019.
The most, I said, devastating and lasting cost of state capture and corruption is the effect on the confidence of the people of South Africa in the leaders and the officials in whom they place great trust and responsibility. State capture has damaged people's confidence in the rule of law, in public institutions, in law enforcement agencies, and even to some extent in the democratic process. That is what makes the work of this commission so essential.
2 more installments of the report are expected before those implicated are likely to be prosecuted. Acting Chief Justice Ramah Zondo stated that the second part of the report will be available at the end of January, while the third and last installment of the report will be presented at the end of February. President Ramaphosa has indicated that he will step aside from the implementation of the Zondo Commission recommendations should he be implicated in allegations of state capture. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
All right then, so the first report is out, all near 800 pages of it. It makes a very interesting reading. Let's see exactly what this means for South Africa. Milton Nkosi is a senior research fellow at the think tank AfriState. He joins us now live on the program. Milton, thank you very much for your time this evening. Much appreciated. What is it that stood out for you in this report? Because it mostly covers SAA, but what are the standout points for you?
I think the report is not surprising, but shocking nevertheless, given the detailed findings and serious findings against state-owned enterprises such as South African Airways and the South African Revenue Services, known locally as SAA and SARS. It found that the former chairman of SAA, Ms. Dudu Myeni, who is very close to the former President Jacob Zuma, it's recommending that she needs to be charged with corruption and fraud for her role in the shenanigans within South African Airways and the subsidiary companies. And then it is also found that the Gupta-linked newspaper, which was known as the New Age, also milked the government entities. It also condemned the former SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane. So not surprising, but still pretty much damning on the former president and his allies. For instance, he's the spokesperson for the Jacob Zuma Foundation, Mzwanele Manye, has already responded by saying he is used as a scapegoat because he supports Jacob Zuma. So now South Africans are waiting for the implementation of those recommendations. In other words, they want remedial action. They want to see the prosecuting authority, the NPA, National Prosecuting Authority, to start now bringing all these cases to court. But the benchmark, as you would know, it's much higher in a court of law than it is in a commission of inquiry to prove beyond reasonable doubt that those implicated or alleged to have conducted themselves in wrongdoing need to be proved guilty beyond reasonable doubt. So that's the complexity and the process that is expected to be implemented following the handing over of the 874-page report to President Cyril Ramaphosa. This is the first part of the report. It will come in 3 parts, and this first part has 3 volumes. So there's quite a lot to go through, even for the president himself.
Indeed, some of us will clearly not be sleeping as we try and read through this entire document. But let's just try and get a sense of where the timelines work here, because as I understand it, the president says he's going to submit a plan of recommendations to Parliament in June after he's gotten the other 2 reports. But at the same time, this first part of the report essentially recommends, as you said, that the police and the National Prosecuting Authority do probe the former SAA chair for, and I'm quoting them here, causing sustained damage to the national airline. So can that probe and that investigation start before the president makes his recommendations to Parliament in June?
Oh, yes, indeed. There's nothing that is stopping the investigating arm of the prosecuting authority to begin in earnest with its work. And actually, they hadn't been waiting for the report. The president was waiting for the report. They can go on with, as long as they have enough of evidence to present to a court of law, and they are prepared to start with the case. They can go ahead. They have enough information now to try and put together winnable cases, especially the lower hanging fruit where there's enough evidence for them to proceed. President Ramaphosa is correct in that he, as the executive head, will have to present it to Parliament before he implements the recommendations that are expected from his desk.
Right, and of course there are 1,400 or so individuals who have been implicated in this. But just walk us through the timelines for the submission of the other reports, because I know there's one that's due at the end of January and then another due at the end of February. And the one due at the end of this month focuses mostly on utilities, Eskom, Transnet, and the arms manufacturer, Denel. Should we expect more of the same here? Things that we already knew that were already in the public domain, but perhaps in just a bit more detail?
Yes, indeed. In South African society, we've heard so much about the state capture, about the Guptas and their relationship with President Zuma and his allies. In fact, that has split the ANC down the middle now. And this year is the ANC elective conference towards the end of the year, where Cyril Ramaphosa will be seeking a second term as head of the governing party. But what has happened is that those who support former President Jacob Zuma are adamant that this is a politically motivated investigation. They think that President Zuma has done no wrong whatsoever. He's being persecuted because of his policies towards the economic trajectory of South Africa. So the second part of the report, which is expected end of this month, and then there is the last part, which is expected end of February. So we will have to see, once the president has gone through all those parts of the state capture report by the deputy Justice Zondo, whether they will be implemented in full. South Africans have lost faith in a way in the implementation phase. There have been many other commissions of inquiry. There was a specific one for the South African Revenue Services, SARS. The Nugent report came out, and as far as the public is concerned, very little came out of it in terms of prosecutions and convictions. So there is some little bit of hope that perhaps after the Zondo report has fully been handed over, then we'll start to see people wearing orange overalls for defrauding the state.
One last question for you, Milton. Where does this leave the ANC? Is this perhaps a critical juncture in the road for the party in terms of how it deals with corruption? Because you look at this report and it just details section after section where the party consistently failed in safeguarding or being an efficient steward of public resources.
In fact, the report's finding says that the ANC abused the procurement processes of government for its own benefit. So Pule Mabe, who speaks on behalf of the ANC, has already issued a statement saying that the ANC will follow the recommendations. Of course, he has no choice because he reports within the ANC to President Ramaphosa, the head of the party, and Cyril Ramaphosa is the president who actually is receiving the report and expecting to implement it on behalf of the executive.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Milton Nkosi, Senior Research Fellow at AfriCID, thank you very much for your time. Now let's head over to Uganda, where a strike by truck drivers in the East Africa region has entered its second day. The truckers who are protesting against COVID-19 testing fees have brought business at the Malaba border post between Kenya and Uganda to a complete standstill. Now, Uganda recently introduced a mandatory $30 fee for all incoming travelers, including truck drivers. Here's Isabel Nakiria with that report.
The protest by truck drivers has caused a pile-up of trucks at the Uganda-Kenya border. Over 3,000 trucks destined for Uganda, Rwanda and South Sudan have paralyzed business at the Malaba border post. Trucks are lined up about 30 kilometers from Malaba to Bungoma in Kenya. The truckers are objecting to a COVID-19 testing fee, which they say is too high for them, after they've already presented negative COVID-19 test results from their respective countries.
Why are they rejecting corona certificates from Kenya if we are East Africans and yet we have already paid the fee?
We are not going to pay any single cent. No truck will enter Uganda.
At the beginning of the pandemic, Uganda was offering free COVID-19 tests to truck drivers, but a decision was made to introduce the $30 fee to cover government costs. Authorities in Uganda have now reduced that fee to $25, but that too is too high for those protesting.
I am having meetings with the drivers. As I talk now, I have the next meeting with the Kenyan counterparts, which is going to be in KRA, Kenya. And we're still going to discuss issues of normalizing traffic.
The Malaba border post is one of Uganda's major entry routes, with thousands of trucks normally bringing in goods from neighboring Kenya's port of Mombasa every day. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Now, debate over Tanzania's public debt levels does continue to rage. The governor of the Bank of Tanzania, Professor Florence Luoga, having to actually step in and comment about this. He says that the country's debt stock is sustainable, and he adds that there's actually room for the East African economy to even take on more debt. According to the central bank, Tanzania's national debt stock went up by $5.3 billion to hit $35.76 billion in the year to October 2021. Now, Professor Luoga says that Tanzania can actually borrow up to 70% of its GDP, and the country's debt to GDP ratio was under 30% in 2020. Now, this debate started to gather momentum late last year, following comments from the Speaker of the National Assembly, Job Ndugai, who expressed worries about the borrowing trend under the administration of President Samia Suluhu Hassan. The Tanzania Coalition on Debt and Development has also urged the government to empower legislators to decide which loans will be accepted and which ones will be rejected, while improving transparency and accountability in how public debt is acquired. Still in Tanzania, despite a slowdown in growth last year, Tanzania's economy is expected to bounce back in 2022. Analysts are banking their hopes on the COVID-19 pandemic receding a little bit and the stabilization of different sectors of the economy. Here's Daniel Kijo with that story.
For entrepreneur Gilbert Malia, the last 2 years have been the hardest of his life. The coronavirus pandemic hit his business and his income dropped dramatically. But at the start of 2022, his kids' clothing store is starting to recover. He says sales are now double what they were this time last year.
We already see that 2022 is a different year for us. This is because of the sales that we have already started seeing as the year progresses. This is because of how the president is supporting businesses. Even more tourists are coming in.
Economic experts say ongoing investment in infrastructure, supportive fiscal policies, and the creation of a conducive business environment will see Tanzania's economy return to growth this year.
FDI is starting to pump in the economy, and when that happens, you see that there is that positivity coming both for foreign and local investors, and that can only be good for investment in Tanzania and what comes with it. I'm talking about employment, opportunities, and all ways of having spillover effects to other sectors, which can only improve our economy.
The mining sector is also expected to increase its contribution to the national GDP this year, following the government signing of 4 major contracts with new mining investors. Over the last 9 months, Tanzania has secured loans amounting to $3 billion from the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the Africa Development Bank. The government says the funding will be used to implement a number of projects which it says will stimulate growth. The government, however, is facing criticism from opposition politicians who say the loans are increasing the national debt. But it says the loans will be transferred to the 2022-2023 budget in order to complete major projects like a hydropower dam along Rufiji River, a crude oil pipeline from Uganda, and a liquefied natural gas processing plant. President Samia Suluhu Hassan says all this is in line with the government's mission to improve living standards.
Kama ilivyotamkwa kwenye mpango wa 3 wa serikali,
just as it is stipulated in the third 5-year development plan 2021 to 2036, that the main aim is to grow the economy from person to person, as well as improving the economy as a whole.
Kama ilivyosema hapo awali.
The new Omicron variant of the coronavirus means it's far from certain that COVID-19 will ease pressure on economies in 2022. But Tanzania's government is hoping key sectors like tourism and mining will help the country's economy to grow again in this 3rd year of the pandemic. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
On to Egypt now. The country has become the latest state to join the Shanghai-based New Development Bank. The NDB, as you might recall, was set up back in 2015 by the BRICS states, that's Brazil, Russia, China, India and South Africa. It's helping to finance development projects in a broad range of developing economies. From Cairo, here's Yasser Kim with the details.
Egypt is the 4th new member admitted to the China-based lender after Bangladesh, the United Arab Emirates and Uruguay. A statement released by Egypt's finance minister says the New Development Bank has enormous financing capabilities and advanced international expertise that can help Egypt meet its financing needs and maximize its efforts in infrastructure development.
Accepting Egypt is a sign of confidence in the Egyptian economy by the BRICS states, especially how the country has faced the coronavirus pandemic and which was the only economy in the region to post positive growth rates. So this trust will translate into investor confidence and therefore open the door for financing of projects in the country.
Egypt is in the midst of a multi-billion-dollar rebuilding process that began in 2016. It saw a major overhaul of its infrastructure, including new sewage systems, new roads, bridges and highways, modern railway system, and even building 27 new cities countrywide, including the 725-kilometer-squared new administrative capital, which is a smart city the size of Singapore. All these projects have placed a heavy financial burden on the emerging economy.
The benefits of the bank include diversifying the sources of funding and favorable terms. Egypt needs a lot of financing for many projects. Most importantly, there will soon be huge energy projects, especially in natural gas and renewables, as well as social development projects. We have a target to focus on clean energy projects as well, which is expected to cost about $6 trillion globally, and Egypt wants to have a share in this.
In its 6 years of existence, the new development bank has funded about 80 projects worth $30 billion. The projects cover sectors including transport, water and sanitation, clean energy, digital infrastructure, social infrastructure, and urban development. The North African nation hopes it will be able to tap into this financing tool to help achieve its developmental goals. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. After delisting from American markets, China Mobile has now listed in Shanghai. And the World's Consumer Tech Conference, CES 2022, starts despite a surge in COVID cases in the US.
Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, and trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Let's make a run through some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. Starting in the DRC, the army, the Democratic Republic of Congo, says it has killed 18 militiamen and lost 2 of its soldiers in a battle in the eastern province of South Kivu. Now, the army spokesperson in the region says the militiamen ambushed their soldiers as they traveled through a village on Tuesday. More than 120 armed groups are active in the eastern end of the DRC, according to a range of monitors, many of them a legacy of regional wars that raged in the 1990s. China's Foreign Affairs Minister Wang Yi has arrived in the Kenyan coastal city of Mombasa after wrapping up his visits to Eritrea. While in the Horn of Africa state, he met with President Isaias Afwerki and the Foreign Minister Osman Saleh. In a joint statement, the two sides confirmed the establishment of a strategic partnership. President Afwerki said that Eritrea and China formed a blueprint for cooperation in areas like mining, agriculture and human resources. He also called China an indispensable partner in Africa's development. On his part, the foreign minister stressed China's willingness to support Eritrea without interfering in its internal matters. And Sudan is facing widespread international pressure in the wake of the resignation of Abdallah Hamdok as Prime Minister. The United States, Norway, the UK, the EU, they've all warned Sudan's military that they will not support a new Prime Minister unless civilians are involved in the process. They added that a credible government and parliament are necessary for the renewal of any economic assistance. The resignation of Prime Minister Hamdok spurred protests. Security forces have faced allegations of targeting and killing demonstrators. As a run through your headlines. Now, the Chinese telecommunications giant China Mobile has been listed in Shanghai. That IPO comes after China Mobile's delisting from the New York stock market in early 2021. As Gao Ang now reports, more large Chinese firms are likely to trade listings in the US for listings back home.
A record listing in China's financial hub. The stock opened at 63 yuan, or nearly $10 per share, over 9% higher than offer price. The chairman of the world's largest mobile operator says the listing paves the way for even greater achievements in the future.
This is another milestone in the development of China Mobile. It marks how the company has successfully built a domestic and overseas capital operations platform, laying a solid foundation for promoting digital intelligence transformation and accelerating high-quality development.
According to IPO prospectus, the company aims to raise up to $8.8 billion in the Shanghai listing. Proceeds will be used to fund 5G network expansion, cloud infrastructure, and tech development. China Mobile boasts the most 5G stations worldwide, with 500,000 as of June 2021. This is in line with the country's huge efforts to develop 5G technology. Experts say the listing will also benefit China's capital market.
Having some of the shares listed in mainland market will help Chinese investors to diversify their wealth because now there is a big chunk of their wealth freed up from the housing market.
The China Mobile IPO in Shanghai comes amid a trend of so-called homecoming listings. Amid global uncertainties, including the ongoing China-US tensions, some overseas listed companies are seeking a comeback in either Hong Kong or Shanghai, including tech giants Baidu and Bilibili.
It is part of a bigger trend of homecoming. But at the same time, we cannot anticipate a huge capital flooding in to the stock market since we still don't have complete freedom in the currency exchange and the capital account.
As analysts have said, China Mobile's Shanghai listing will benefit Chinese investors and the capital market. It remains to be seen how this capital market matures as government doubles down efforts to open up the financial sector. Gang, CGTN, Shanghai.
All right, then into the business of energy. Barely 24 hours ago, members of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, and their allies agreed to increase oil output by 400,000 barrels a day as originally planned. As CGTN's Johann Plashberger now reports from Vienna, that decision was pretty much in line with market expectations.
OPEC's decision to continue its moderate increase in oil output had been widely expected for two major reasons: crude supply disruptions in Libya, one of Africa's leading exporters, and the limited impact of the coronavirus Omicron variant on the market.
In terms of consumption, the impact of Omicron has been significantly less, roughly half of what it was with Delta. Essentially, we're still firing on all cylinders in terms of global demand. So in this sense, it doesn't really make sense to alter the previous course.
According to analyst Victor Catona, given the world's rundown stocks of crude, OPEC's latest decision was unavoidable in order to keep the oil market balanced. Meanwhile, Europe's natural gas market has been at the center of an energy crisis, with prices quadrupling compared to last year. But a recent decision in Brussels could help.
Now, with the European Commission deciding that natural gas is a green or a sustainable source of energy, it still needs to find those providers who would be big enough to accommodate Europe's interest.
Uncertainty remains over issues such as the Nord Stream 2 pipeline between Russia and Germany, as well as commitments to Gazprom, the largest supplier of natural gas to Europe. So geopolitical concerns could mean an additional burden to the already pandemic-hit energy market. Analysts predict that this year the world will do a better job handling the pandemic, and therefore supply and demand for crude oil should steadily rise. A positive outlook for the oil market post-pandemic. Johannes Bleschberger, CGTN, Vienna.
After going fully virtual last year, the world's largest consumer electronics show, CES, is back to being an in-person event. But with the US reporting record-breaking levels of new daily cases of COVID, the event is kicked off in Las Vegas with a note of caution. CGTN's Mark New has the details on what's hot tonight.
As attendees picked up their CES badges at the airport, staff handed them COVID-19 rapid tests. When the preview CES Unveiled event kicked off, only vaccinated participants were allowed in, along with mandatory masking, social distancing, and plexiglass dividers. In the weeks leading up to the event, more than 150 companies withdrew from attending in person. That included big-name companies such as Microsoft, Amazon, Lenovo, Google, OnePlus, and Facebook parent company Meta.
Were you worried that this wasn't going to happen?
I'm not going to lie. I mean, certainly I'm human, and what we had to do is we had to balance the fact that we have a few big names that made a big splash for their own reasons that we understand, versus the fact that we are designed as an event and run with a mission.
Shapiro believes attending CES is safer than shopping at many stores and far safer than attending public sporting events.
And what we heard from so many exhibitors is, please go forward with this event. It's so important for us. It's important to get our message out. And that's what's exciting, is that innovation is solving fundamental problems in the world.
That includes companies taking on the very problem that threatens CES itself.
I can take out my mask because in crisis there's also innovation. It's called the LOD, the light of disinfection. The air that I breathe provokes some aerosol, and those aerosols are sucked through this light, which is not the normal light. And inside a tunnel of disinfection with UVC that disinfects the COVID-19 variant Alpha, Delta, and Omicron, but also the other viruses like the flu or the gastroenteritis.
And one of the health tech companies that made the journey to CES is from France, Barracuda. They created the smart mirror called Artemis. It can take my weight, also do my vitals here, and I can look at my skin, right? Have a skin coach, or it can actually help me with a makeover.
If you can see a movie about the mirror, it's really different from testing it for real. But also for pure business relationships. It does not have the same feeling as doing another Zoom call. So it's really changing, and this is a platform, so it's all about working with other startups, working with other technology. So for us to be able to be part of this ecosystem is very important.
Having attended CES Unveil for nearly a decade, this was the first time I saw so many unfilled spaces. Still, more than 2,200 companies are signed up to exhibit at CES this week, determined not to let the pandemic halt the progress of technical innovation. Mark New, CGTN, Las Vegas.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices. We'll focus on oil at this point. So OPEC was our focus a little earlier, but they only managed to make part of the planned increase of 400,000 barrels a day in December. In fact, they actually raised output by around 22% of that figure, according to Bloomberg. Now, Libya and Nigeria primarily held back output. Libya's output, in fact, fell as the country's biggest oil field, Sharara, was pretty much knocked offline by militia groups. In Nigeria, output was down by 110,000 barrels a day. Its output fell to around 1.4 million barrels of crude every day. Here's what's coming up next. We'll introduce you to a female entrepreneur in Nigeria who set up the first plant in the country to recycle used car tires.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to the program. Let's introduce you to a Nigerian entrepreneur who's identified an alternative type of black gold, used car tires. Now, she set up Freetown Waste Management Recycle, which she says is Nigeria's first industrial plant dedicated to transforming these old discarded tires into paving bricks, floor tiles and other goods that are in pretty high demand in Africa's most populous nation.
A batch of used tires being processed at the Freetown Waste Management Recycle Factory in Ibadan, southwest Nigeria. Entrepreneur Ife Dolapo set up the $5 million facility to transform old tires into paving bricks, floor tiles, and other goods that are in high demand in Africa's most populous nation.
Creating something new from something that would otherwise be lying somewhere as waste, as was part of the motivation, like what can we be doing from this in terms of upcycling or recycling, which is why we started out with tires. And most people don't know that for your tires, the entire component of a tire is valuable in terms of the metal in the tire, the fiber in the tire.
Waste management in Nigeria is patchy at best. In villages, towns and cities, piles of waste are a common sight, and often residents burn them at night for lack of a safer disposal method. Tires are routinely dumped and abandoned. Freetown relies on scavengers to collect old tires from dumping grounds, and some tires are also supplied directly by motor mechanics. They are paid $0.17 to $0.24 per tire.
Tires would ideally just lay waste. You would find them in drainages, you just find them in the corner, stockpiled, nothing to do with them. But now we are able to, create an entire value chain around the tires. The organizers know that if they get the tires across to us, they're going to get paid.
So far, more than 100,000 tires have been recycled into everything from speed bumps to soft paving for playgrounds. The recycled rubber paving bricks come in a variety of shapes and sizes and sell for about $24 per square meter.
I believe it's important that we support anybody that recycles in our country, and taking tires, which are an environmental nuisance, and turning them into something that children can play on, I think is a win-win for everybody.
Freetown started operations in 2020 with just 4 employees. And the growth has been rapid, with the workforce jumping to 128 at present.
We do have a 5-year growth plan, which includes expansion and diversification into other types of waste, such as paper, PET bottles, electronic waste, amongst other things.
The new production lines could help the company reach a target of recycling 15 million tires annually. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
All right, then a quick run through the currencies. Very brief note with respect to the Naira. It spent most of the second half of 2021 somewhere around the 414 level, give or take. Then it essentially spiked a little bit, a bit of a devaluated start to the start of the year, if you will. 425.41 on the 4th of January in the formal interbank market, but it did come back down a little bit, paring those losses by around 1.6% to today's level of 418.76. Those are your currencies, and that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screen right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.